Let's talk about how to get a better grade on writing a paragraph in our English classes. There is a process that we're going to go over today that may help you get that elusive A. Here is an example of the things that I go through whenever I'm writing a paragraph. The first thing, obviously, that we're going to do is we're going to read whatever selection that we're supposed to read. We're looking for, as we're reading, we're looking for themes, and we're looking for interesting observations that we may come up with that are unique. After we've read, or maybe during the process of reading, we're going to decide on a topic. Again, it can be a theme, it can be one of those interesting observations or a couple of those interesting observations that you can have. Following that, we're going to gather evidence from a selection. That means that we're going to have to read through it again to come up with some of the quotations and some of the maybe those observations in order to prove our point. Then we're going to create a plan, an outline, and we're going to stick to that plan. We're going to stick to that outline while we're proving our point. Finally, we're going to write using that outline, and then we're going to edit, and then we're going to turn it on our paper. Obviously, after you fix the corrections. The first thing that I have to do is read. So we're doing, or we're going to use the poem The Raven. I'm going to read through this and I'm going to talk my way through this so that you can see the process that I go through whenever I'm reading. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volumes of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "Some visitor," I muttered, "tapping at my chamber door, only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. At this point, I'm kind of realizing that this guy's he's kind of spooked out a little bit. He's scared for some reason. Nameless here forevermore. And a silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This is it, and nothing more." At this point, I noticed that he hears the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain. This is something that, if he has indeed read, as he says up here, that he's read many nights before, this is something that he's probably heard. Why tonight then is it bothering him? To me, this is starting to hint at one of the themes that there's some self-torture going on. He's allowing things to get into his head that normally wouldn't. He's allowing things to bother him that normally would not. So let's scroll up here. Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, 'Lenore?' This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, 'Lenore.' Merely this and nothing more." Here again, he tells us that he knows it's an echo. He says it's an echo, but he allows it to spook him out again, as if Lenore was repeating, "Lenore." Again, self-torture is really what I'm leaning toward as far as what I'm going to write about at this point. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard the tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see, then, what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, in stepped the stately raven of saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, Not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with the mane of a lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of chalice just above my chamber door, perched and sat, nothing more. Then the ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Oh, thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's plutonium shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. At this point, he's not spooked out as much. It's just a bird. But then he goes on. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we can't help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door with such a name as nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on that placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if its soul that in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave us. He will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Again here, he tells us in the stanza before, up here, uh, that it's meaning little relevancy bore, that it doesn't really mean anything, but he's taking what the bird says, and he's really, again, terrifying himself, even though he knows that it really doesn't mean all that much. So let's continue. Then the bird, are startled at the stillness broken by so aptly spoken, by reply so aptly spoken. Doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store. He again knows it's its only stock and store. He knows that the bird doesn't say anything else. Caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore. But the raven, still beguiling my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of the bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking, what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim and gamely, ghastly, gaunt and ominous bird of yore mitten croaking nevermore. So knowing that this bird only says one thing, and knowing that this bird doesn't have any relevancy and no meaning, he brings himself into a chair in front of the bird, and this is what he does. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloated o'er she shall press on nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfume from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by the angels he hath sent thee, respite, respite, and nepenthe from my memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh, quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, evermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet, steal it, bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home of horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, ah, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore, quoth the raven, nevermore. He asked the bird if there is a heaven, basically. And the bird, of course, says the one thing he says, which is nevermore. He knows the answer, and he's completely torturing himself. He's creating this terrifying atmosphere for himself. It's not the bird, it's him. He's doing it himself. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet, still of bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aden it shall clasp a maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Cause a rare and maiden whom the angels name Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Again, he asks a question. Is Lenore in heaven? And the bird says, quoth the raven, nevermore. It's the only thing he says. The only thing the bird says is nevermore. This guy is asking questions to a bird that only says no. Is Lenore in heaven? Nope. Be that our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's plutonium shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that thou lie thou hast spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door, quoth the raven. Nevermore. So he asked the bird to leave, and the bird says, nope. And the raven never flitting, still is sitting, on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. His eyes have all the semen of a demon that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadows on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted evermore. As I've read through this poem, I've decided that I'm going to deal with self-torture. Once I have decided on my theme, I picked up my theme as I read. I decided on the topic. It's going to be self-torture and how he tortures himself. And I came up with that as I read. So the next thing I have to do is I have to gather evidence. That means that I'm going to have to read again. Maybe not read it, but go back and pick up some of those things that I picked up as I read, and kind of looking for those quotations that help prove that there was some self-torture. I've already highlighted these. We'll go through them. Suddenly there came a tapping, rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor. He knows that it's nothing real serious. He thinks it's just somebody at his door. Then he turns this silken satin, certain purple, silken satin, and I'm sorry, and the silken sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain. He turns this into something that is fantastic terrors. These fantastic terrors. Again, he's heard this before. He's read here before. He's been in this room before. He knows what the sound is, and he makes it into something scary. When he opens the door, there's darkness there. He's deep into the darkness peering. He stands there too long, and then he whispers Lenore. He knows it's an echo, but somehow he turns it into this ghostly presence of someone echoing back, Lenore. It doesn't happen. He knows it doesn't happen. Going on further, he has that the meaning of the nevermore is nothing. There's little relevancy, little meaning in the word nevermore. Yet he continues to give it some weight and terrify himself even more. He knows that what it utters, the nevermore, is its only stock and store. So again, he knows that the bird can only say one word, but he allows that one word to completely destroy him later on whenever he asketh these questions. Is there a heaven? Is Lenore in heaven? So I choose those quotations that are going to help me out later. And then he finally asks it, are you going to leave? The bird says, nope. So after I've gone through and I've picked out that evidence, I've picked out the things that, those quotations that I feel like are going to help me prove my point. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to create an outline or a plan for my writing. So I have self-torture here, and I've already made the outline to make it a little faster for us. So let me bring it up here. So self-torture is my topic. My first point that I'm going to use in order to prove that he tortures himself is that he hears things that are normal and he changes them into fear. The quotation that I'm going to use there is going to have to do with the silken sad uncertain rustling of each purple curtain. He calls out the name of a lost loved one. This is whenever he opens the door, there's darkness there, nothing more, and he whispers the word Lenore, and an echo murmurs back, Lenore. He doesn't think that it's a ghost, but he allows himself to kind of terrify himself by thinking that there's ghostly presence. He knows it's an echo. He tells us that it's an echo. And lastly, he knows the answers to the questions that he asks at the end. He knows the bird is going to say no. And so he just simply asks questions in the wrong way. He knows the bird's going to say no. You would think that he would, be smarter in the way he asks the questions, but he doesn't. He asks questions, he gets no, and he knows that there's little relevancy and little meaning in the answer, but he allows the answer to terrify him. So self-torture is my topic. That is my plan, and I'm going to stick to my plan. From here, I'm going to, after I've got my plan, I've created my plan of attack right here, create an outline. The next thing I'm going to do is write. And again, I've already wrote the paragraph. It's right here. And we're going to read through it to see how I did. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to make sure that I have my name, the teacher's name, the class's name, and the date all in the upper left-hand corner. Those are easy points to get. Make sure you get those. I like to title mine. You don't have to title yours. I like to give mine a title. The title of this one is going to be Driving Yourself Crazy. Now let's read through and see how I did. The narrator in The Raven, although of a sound mind, drives himself to insanity through self-torture. Notice here that I've got right to the point. I'm telling you, I'm going to write about himself driving himself insane by torturing himself. Now the next sentence is called an expanding sentence. I'm going to expand upon how I'm going to attack this argument. My argument is that he tortures himself. My expanding sentence is going to tell the reader of this paragraph how I'm going to prove that he tortures himself. Here's how I'm going to do it. As he changes sounds into haunts, calls out to absent ghosts, and asks questions that the Raven can only answer in the negative, he drives himself into a panic. So my paragraph should start with, my first concrete detail should have to do with turning sounds into haunts. My second concrete detail should be about calling out to absent ghosts, and then the third one should be about asking questions that only have no as an answer. Let's see how I do. Throughout the opening of the poem, the narrator hears common sounds that he turns into creepy torment simply by overanalyzing their presence. Surely as he read in his room on nights before, he heard the silken sound and certain rustling of each purple curtain. Yet here, he chooses to allow this everyday sound to drive him into terrors never felt before, as his imagination generates a ghastly presence. So my first concrete detail is complete with the two commentaries. And as you can see, the concrete detail addresses the first part of my outline, which is that he is overanalyzing the sounds that he's obviously heard before. After I have that concrete detail, I have two pieces of commentary that prove that what I'm saying throughout the opening of the poem, the narrator hears common sounds that he turns into creepy torment simply by overanalyzing their presence. My commentary are going to prove that that is true. And that's what I do with the two sentences following. That he read in his room before, and he knows that that sound is there, and that he allows that sound to turn him into terrors. My next concrete detail is still he continues to torture himself, calling out to imagine ghosts. And if I look up here, that's what's in my expanding sentence. The second part of my proof is going to be that he calls out to absent ghosts. Let's see if I prove that well. My two commentaries proving this are going to be when he first opens the door and whispers to his lost loved one, he acknowledges that an echo murmured back the word Lenore. Yet with all his soul within him burning, he suggests that her ghost whispers a word, creating even more terror. So here I'm saying he knows it's an echo, and that he turns it into her ghost, kind of whispering that word. And my final concrete detail, his self-torture reaches an apex when he asks questions that he knows the Raven will answer with its only stock and store. I'm emphasizing its only stock and store because I want the reader to know that the narrator in this poem knows that the bird only says one thing. One would think he would frame his questions more carefully if he knows the answer, nevermore, in advance. Nevertheless, he asks if his lost loved one resides in heaven, if heaven comes after death, if the bird will ever leave. Of course, the Raven answers no to all of these questions, tormenting the narrator with an ill-conceived notion of truth. Now here I have three commentary. That third sentence I feel like I needed to add to complete the argument. And then, of course, my final sentence is going to be the conclusion. I'm restating, so to speak, the topic sentence. But I really, in this conclusion, want you to understand what I want you to learn as a reader from my paragraph. Although he knows the events and questions of this night, little relevancy bore, the narrator allows the sequence to drive him into a deep and self-imposed madness. That's what I want you to get from reading my paragraph. I want you to think that this narrator has made all of this up and has a self-imposed panic, a self-imposed terror. This is not this is not something that you or I would sit in a room and listen to and be afraid of. This is something that you and I would listen to and say, "Oh wow, it's just a bird. Oh wow, there's a knocking there. I've heard that before. It's no big deal." So that's what I want you to learn, and that's what the concluding paragraph does. Now, a couple of details that are happening that we'll go over. Let me erase some of this real quick, if you don't mind. Go back over here. I want to show you some details that will help you with gaining some extra points whenever you're writing. Racist. There are things that I put in here. Some of them are what we call, well, here I have throughout the opening door, or throughout the opening of the poem. This is a transitional phrase. This brings me from one sentence to the next smoothly. You see it with surely here. You see it with yet right here. You see it with still right here. These are transitional words that allow me to go from one sentence to the other smoothly. When he first opens the door and whispers to his lost loved one, again, that's transitioning. Yet, finally, um, even this one right here, one would think more careful that one would think he would frame his questions more carefully. All of these are transitions. They transition from one to the other, one sentence to another. Although he knows the events of the questions of the night will relevancy bore. Again, transitions are important, allowing sentences to flow from one to the other so that they're not choppy, so that there's no, immediate stops or uncomfortable stops in your writing. That will help you out. Um, making sure that you document your quotations properly with the page numbers. In this case, since it's a poem, I'm going to use line numbers. Making sure that you do that properly. The quotations are inside of the page numbers. The period is on the outside. Hopefully, guys, this will help you come up with some good ideas to make better grades on your paragraphs. So good luck.